We won't tell you guys this, but we were sitting here waiting for the thing to go live, and then Tom realized we actually had to press the button that says go live. So sorry for being about 45 seconds late, but
Good thing the
Tom,
show is not
Carson,
about technology, huh?
that's
About
right.
using
That's right.
technology.
Yeah. Tom, Carson, welcome
Brandon?
as usual. Thanks for being here and being awesome host. I'm on the other side of this today, everybody. I'm actually hosting because we have an awesome guest, right, Carson? Mr. Tom Burton is our guest. Our guest.
Fresh, yeah, fresh from the yellow brick road.
That's right.
Right.
That's
Just
right.
pulled off
So
that highway. Just pulled off the
No, I
highway.
am not going to take that as a layup movie reference today. I aim to be better. So
yeah, you got more in you. We believe in you. So everybody, welcome. If you're in the comments or if you're on the live, please go in the comments and tell us who you are, where you're from, so we can say hi, give you a little shout out. If you're on the podcast, thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe and also to share us with your friends. If we make you laugh a little bit, we add some value to you. We'd love for you to subscribe. And last thing before we jump into our dad joke competition, hope you're ready, Carson. I brought my A game today. Is just a reminder to come join us on modernsellerhq.com, which is our free community. And we've got all sorts of training in there. There's great conversations going in there. We just added a new space of social selling for women that we'll announce the awesome space leader for that here soon. But a lot of really good stuff, a lot of great conversations going on in there. So please come join us at modernsellerhq.com. Okay, Carson, you ready for the dad joke challenge?
always.
I think ChatGPT should go first today.
ChatGPT usually has to go first, and then you get this opportunity to kind of pivot and
Right.
figure out what funny joke.
All right. Okay, here we go. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
What do you call a fly without wings?
No fly.
A walk.
I got you beat today. So ChatGPT.
Carson, you know you wanted to laugh at that. You just fought it. You didn't want to give it to me. You fought it. You know that was funny.
Well, we go to the audience for these. So the audience is the most impartial. And frankly, I don't have a horse in the race. I ask ChatGPT on every episode to arm me with a funny dad joke, keyword emphasis on funny, for our show. Today's is, what do you call fake spaghetti? An impasta.
Yeah, pasta.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Do I get a vote?
Always, yeah.
You're the guest.
I'm voting for ChatGPT this week, which puts ChatGPT ahead 6-2, I think.
That's right. We got Butch in here. Butch will vote for me.
I know where Butch is going to vote.
I'll feel good about myself.
Yeah.
Butch is in your corner. Yeah. See?
Yeah. Clear.
He supports you as well. So you're the people's choice.
Yeah,
That's right.
People's choice.
I am the people's choice. That's right. I never win an Oscar, but I get a people's choice. I'll take it. I do it for the fans anyway. Okay, so let's jump into this because I'm excited about this. I think this is a really good conversation. It's a conversation that we've been having inside of Modern Seller as well, and that's why we asked Tom to be the guest. But Tom, just everybody knows who you are, but for those that might be new, tell everybody a little bit about you and how you got to this place of being our revenue zone guru.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been in predominantly running tech businesses most of my career. I have a degree in computer science, but early on in my career, I got really interested in sales and marketing and the business side of it. And I don't know, I guess it was right before the pandemic. I was in a board meeting with one of our companies and, getting grilled in a usual board meeting. How are sales? What are your confidence level on sales? What does your forecast look like? And I realized in that board meeting, like, I didn't have a good answer. I didn't feel confident in what I was saying, but I couldn't really at that point in time figure out why. I just had this, punch in the stomach feeling like, I feel like I'm kind of BSing here and not really providing good data. And so I left that and I said, something is different here. Something is different. I don't know why I don't have confidence in what I'm saying in our sales pipeline. So I then kind of did a deep dive on really looking at everything that had changed. And what I found was a lot had changed, at least compared to the way I had always done sales, and the companies I'd worked with had always done sales and marketing. And really that big change revolved around the buyer. It wasn't the seller, it was the buyer had changed, and the buyer
Mm.
dynamics had changed. And so as I started to go through all of this and get it all together and talking to a lot of people, they're like, you got to put this in a book. You got to put this in a book. And so that's where the revenue zone ultimately came from, is all of this research I had done to try and figure out what had changed and how to change to adapt to this new world. So that's the quick overview.
Cool, cool. Thank you for that, Tom. I'm going to jump into this because I know, I believe this is a really important conversation, and I'm really excited for both of you to be able to share on this. But Tom, I want to start with this: is the question is, what do buyers don't want? Let's start in the negative. Is that a double negative? Did I say
What
it
do
the right
buyers
way?
don't want? I think, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I think the answer to that, right? We're all buyers. So think about ourselves as buyers, whether even as a consumer or as a business buyer. But the biggest thing is, as buyers, we don't want to make mistakes. So we don't want to make a bad choice. We don't want to make a bad purchase. We don't want to get pressured into something that, then we have buyer's remorse about. And it was funny, I was walking through Costco a couple nights ago, and, my wife was like, hey, look at this nice golf shirt or whatever. And she picks it up. And my first thing that's going through my head is like, well, do I really need that? And is it going to fit? And, all of these things, right? I was like on the defense because I didn't want to make a stupid purchase or buy something I didn't need, or buy something that's just going to end up in the closet and never get worn, or it doesn't fit. And all of those types of things, right? That's a little itty bitty example, but think about that in the business world, when there's a lot on the line when we're making B2B purchases. So, companies, individuals within companies, and I'm sure you see this, of course, Carson, in your world, they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to be pressured into something that later on they said, God, I shouldn't have done that. And let's face it, we've all had that happen in our career or even in our personal, lives. We've bought something because we got pressured into it. And then afterwards we were, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, or I didn't want to do that, or God, I bought something, what I actually bought was different than I thought I was buying, or all of those different things. So what we don't want is, we don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to be pressured into things, and we don't want the remorse that goes with that. Now, we'll talk about it in a minute. I know what we want, but that's really the defensive part of it, of what we're, as buyers, what we're trying to do.
Or sometimes my teenage daughter pressures me to buy her something that just ends up sitting in her closet. But
Exactly.
it's a whole nother story. Tom, you said something super important here.
That's another podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show. We're going to be coaching dads on how to get through those tough moments. You hit on something that's super important here, Tom. The risks that are associated with making a buying mistake, feeling pressured, or experiencing buyer's remorse. A lot of times we as sellers, we don't think about that, nor do we coach and train our sellers to think about that. And I think that's why it's so important to look at that perspective. I'd love to get a feeling from you too. What are some of the common misconceptions that you think a lot of sales professionals have about buyers' needs and preferences, and where should we be looking instead?
Well, we get trained right on, as buyers or marketers, even look for the customer's problem, understand the prospect's problem. Well, that we may understand the problem, but we don't understand internally what is on the line to solve that problem. What is expected, or what is how are they expected to solve that problem? So just because we understand the problem doesn't mean that we should jump to the conclusion that we know how they want to have that problem solved, or even if we have the right solution to solve that problem, right? It's kind of a big leap, and so I think right away we get out of whack a bit with the buyer, because we make assumptions that may or may not be true, because we think we understand their problem. And if you look at most sales and marketing books, it's all about find the problem, find the problem. You got to find the problem. I'm not saying you shouldn't know the problem, but then how you actually go about dealing with that and communicating that are a little bit different.
And trust me, if you're asking what keeps you up at night or what's your greatest challenge, get in line with the other 1,000 people that already asked him the same thing, and you'll probably be ignored. So, yeah, thank you, Tom, for really framing it up. Brandon.
Well, I want to.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark says he's got a timeshare. I mean, I'm all over that. So.
Oh, hey, I'm all ears. Can we add him in real time? I want to hear more.
I mean,
I saw that. Yeah, what I like about it is Tom will buy it and then he'll never use it, but then he can gift it to us, Carson, and we'll go use it. I think that's the way timeshares work.
Yes.
You know, my mother-in-law sold timeshares for a while, and she had a really interesting saying one time. She said, timeshares are meant to be sold, not purchased.
Yeah, isn't there a bigger market aftermarket for timeshares than there is for timeshares? So the resale market?
Probably. Yeah. So Tom, as you were saying that, the question that came to my mind too around that is, and Carson, I'd love your input on this too, is you're right. We read a lot. It's like find the problem, find the problem, find the problem. How do we go about really not just finding the problem, but also assessing how big of a problem that is? I think a lot of times as sellers, we're just looking for anything to bite, right? And they say something about a problem, and then we hone in on it and we want to overemphasize it because we have an answer for that problem. How do we do that with buyers these days to navigate that?
Well, as I've always taught and done, right, I look at problems, quote unquote, into three categories. There's a 911 type problem, right? Where, you know, and this just happened recently with the Silicon Valley Bank all of a sudden shutting down, and all these people came out, hey, I have a loan for you, I can cover your payroll. That was sort of a 911 problem, at least for a couple of days anyway. But think about it in your own world. Like if you have a plumbing problem and you need a plumber, right? You have an immediate problem that you need solved right now. In business, there sometimes is 911 problems, but they're actually kind of few and far between. Then there's the next one, which is kind of what I call the vitamin problem, right? There's a problem that's something that I should do something about. I ought to do something about it. It's probably, not optimum, but is it a 911 situation that I'm willing to stop everything that I'm doing and go solve that problem? Maybe, maybe not. So it becomes more of a longer term challenge. But that second bucket of that problem is there, if it is a vitamin type problem, not a painkiller like the other one, is there an impending event? So is there something in the organization that actually, a deadline or some impending event that actually causes the organization to follow through on that vitamin problem? And then there's a third category, which is a vitamin problem or a vitamin situation with no impending event, which are the worst, because you could have a customer going, yeah, I really feel like we should solve this, but there's no impending event. It's very easy for other priorities to come in and overtake it. It's very easy for something that's supposed to take 3 months to go to 9, all of those types of things, because there's nothing there to put that impending event. So I always try and look at problems in those three categories, at least to start with, and then try and figure out how to navigate based around what it is that we're doing. Does that answer the question, Brandon, of what you were asking? Or
Yeah, I think so. Carson, how do you coach your team on the sales side?
So again, I mean, we talk about this so often, but I think it's important to revisit it. It comes down to relationships and staying at the pulse of what's happening in that organization. And as you go out and seek to become that trusted advisor, you're going to be having these conversations that arm you with ultimately what is a win to these folks. Now, your aim, and this is how my team and I try to operate. Your aim is ultimately to go out there and instill trust through transparency that we are going to be able to maintain our status at the pulse of what's going on in that organization. The buyer's needs change all the time. We're seeing that right now in real time. A lot of our conversations right now around where can we help alleviate costs? How can we make the overall investments more digestible? Now, this can come in the way of how do we, help take out customer third-party solutions that we may be able to replace, or where might we be able to get creative in the spirit of long-term partnership? And I think that's what's important. Mm-hmm. That's not the same conversation we were having a year or 2 or 3 or 5 ago. So I think the key element is to determine, okay, what is the problem, which you can do from company reports, earnings calls, ideally the voice of the customer directly, because you want to be able to sit down with that executive and hear exactly what they're looking to achieve and find a way to find common ground to make it happen. You're also going to be armed with a lot of other voices and perspectives. I love how Tom articulated this, because there are obviously different types of problems. There's clear and present danger, where they're going to come to you and we've got an immediate timeline. We need you to alleviate and eradicate this problem. To, hey, we've got a little bit longer of operating room to be able to do this in. But either way, it's game time. It's problem elimination time.
Carson, that was the most impressive way of slipping a movie into conversation that you've had yet.
That was unplanned.
Bravo, my friend.
Yeah.
Unplanned.
Bravo. That was,
and
well
it's still
done.
early, so we're still waiting for the main show with that.
Absolutely. I like to keep people guessing.
No, I want to just add something to what you just said, though, and this goes back to everything we talk about each week about relationship, and is the core of the modern selling strategy. But that relationship gives you the ability to understand those problems and to actually get real. We've seen this, Brandon, right? When we have a relationship with somebody, they'll spill the beans on what they're looking to solve. When you don't have a relationship, they end up being a little bit, hey, they're not sure if we're a salesperson or not, or can they trust us, or all of those things. And so to really understand any problem, you have to have the relationship to be able to get the data. And then you can determine, is it a clear and present danger, or is it something that can, move along from there?
Tom, this is good stuff. And I want to spend some more time on what does the buyer not want, and what do they need. I think sometimes as sellers, we feel compelled to we get the meeting and we almost verbal vomit everything that we think is phenomenal about our offering or our company or whatever it is, right? We show up just, seeking to unload all this great information. How do you recommend that salespeople balance that need and compulsion to provide information and insights with the risk of overwhelming buyers with just way too much information that may not be pertinent?
Well, I think what you're talking about is not only a problem as a seller, right, but as the buyers, when they want to go do their own research and they want to be on their own journey and all of that, is a big risk, is getting overwhelmed with information, right? We know there's no shortage of information, and it comes from different sources. It's conflicting information in a lot of cases, different data, different viewpoints, all of that stuff. So whether you're getting it from a salesperson or from the internet or from your online research, the risk of overload, information overload, is very, very high. And the fact is, Brandon and I were talking about this before the show. The fact is that sales cycles have increased in length in the B2B world. There are more and more no decisions than there have been. And a lot of that is because of that information overload and that confusion. So you have to be able to bring back clarity to the buyer, but at the same time, respect that the buyer wants to be able to do that research on their own and provide a way for them to get there without, again, the pressure or feeling like they have to interact with the salesperson if they're not ready to. So it's definitely, had side effects, I guess you'd say, on the fact that the buyer, is more in control of that journey.
Yeah. Sorry, my brain was going down a couple of different paths, and then I sat there and went and said nothing. But I think for both of you guys, how do we as sellers, align or show up better with buyers, knowing that these are the ongoing problems? What are some of the more tangible tactics? I know we get great feedback on the show when we have practical, tactical advice, but what are some of the things you'd recommend for the salespeople listening to this to align themselves better with the buying process, but also the challenges that buyers have?
Well, I think, we go back to our favorite topic of mindset, first of all. So you have to be able to take that mindset. And I think that's going back to what I was talking about, even in the beginning of the show, of my moment of the gut punching moment in the board meeting, was taking a step back and going, I've got to look at things very differently. And I have to respect the way things have changed, but how do I adapt? Right? We still have, businesses to run. We still have to make sales in order for our business to succeed. We still have, targets and quotas, all of those things. It doesn't go away. We just have to be able to adapt into that piece that's there. So I think the first thing is, and one of you said, I'm not sure Brandon or if it's Carson in the beginning, but a lot of times as salespeople, we don't look at it through the lens of the buyer. We keep trying to look at it through the lens of ourself. And the first thing that we need to do is, and that's the mindset shift, is take a step back and look at everything as much as we can through the lens of that buyer, and then figure out how to adapt and play in that game versus trying to shove our game onto that buyer. So I think that's the very, very first step that we need to do. And we've talked a lot about this in a lot of ways in previous shows.
Yeah, Carson, what would you add to
It's a
that?
buying journey for a reason. And first, we've got to earn our ticket to entry, right? But I look at every great deal that I've done, and there's always a friendly or a champion within that customer organization. And often we lean on these people and everyone else that's part of the customer part of the buying journey. We lean on these buyers to show us what are their priorities, but also what are their key milestones. I have to know what is important to them. What are the timelines, the deadlines, the processes? What does their buying process look like? Does legal have to review? Does this go to the board? Are there multiple levels of influence and review? I have to know all these things early on, and then it comes down to mutual accountability. Because look, if I've earned the right to be the trusted advisor, I've got to make sure that I'm continuing to bring value and transparency and doing the things that I'm supposed to do along the way, responding, proactively reaching out, and making sure that I've got something comprehensive that is what I've committed to. But the way that we stay at the pulse of what is on the buying journey and what that process looks like is by earning these relationships and then asking the right questions. I mean, it comes down to, and Tom, you said it perfectly, right? We've got to put it ourselves in the position of the buyer, understand what is a win for them, understand what are risks for them, because at the end of it, we're asking them to make that risk or to de-risk that as much as we can as a seller.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Tom, before we move on, do you want to grab Nikki's comment here? I like the way that she brought that in. Is really kind of summarized what both of you guys are saying. And Tom, I know you bring this up a lot, but it's mindset that really has to shift in order for us to take these things like Nikki summarized and really make them important.
Yeah, completely. And I think part two of, once you've got mindset and you're looking at it through the lens of the buyer, and you're knowing, the buyer wants to be in control of their own journey. So now you're saying, okay, how first of all, build the relationship, right? We know that is the key foundation. But once you have that healthy connection and you have a relationship, how do you then become that trusted advisor, and how do you facilitate that journey? And this can be done both at a sales level, kind of one-to-one, or one-to-many at a marketing level. But we're talking more sales at this point as it relates to, one-to-one type of interaction. So that's where we've, in my book, I talk about the yellow brick road. I say, okay, for the types of buyers that I'm selling to, generally, what is the information that they need, the data that they need to be able to make a good decision that they're going to be, good, excited about, and not have buyer's remorse? What are the things they need to understand, and what do they need to believe? And then how do I provide that information in the right sequence that they can digest it and make that good decision? In the book, I use the example of, my wife wanting to go to an art museum, and I'm not a big art guy, right? But I've been to art museums, and like, you just roam around and you get done at the end of the day, you have no idea what you've looked at. You're just kind of glazed over, right? And then we went to the Boston Museum of Art, and they had this guide that took us through the paintings and explained them and all. And it was like, wow, I left there, felt like I really had a great experience. And it was the same museum. It was just a different experience. And I think that's what we want to do with our buyers, is we want to be a guide. We want to lead them through help them understand it, keep them out of the rabbit holes. And we have to continually do that by keeping the trust, because the minute you, Brandon, you say this all along, the minute we kind of throw the switch and we try and be a salesperson, what happens? They backpedal, they get defensive, you get ghosted, then you have to call Ghostbusters, right? All of those things start to happen.
Tom, I think it's really all about which museum you go to, because when I went to the Philadelphia Fine Arts Museum, I ran up the steps. That's a dad joke and reference all in one. I mean, this is otherworldly. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up.
Man!
I'll give a free copy of my book to whomever posts first in the chat what movie I just referenced.
God, I can picture it too.
I think you guys. I think you guys are going every which way you can.
We're all over the place today, and I still have another movie reference coming. But
wait! Did you guys miss my movie reference there? Good old Clint Eastwood movie, Every Which Way You Can.
Oh yeah.
No?
Yeah, nope, I get it. Yeah, Every Which Way But Loose.
Man, yes, Every Which Way But Lose. You're right. Well, you guys weren't losing. He had another one. What was he? He had a different movie.
You nailed it.
He had another movie.
Brandon, you nailed it. Yes. Well done.
There you go. Right. Yo, Carson. I like it. Hey, guys. So this topic comes into buyer enablement versus sales enablement. I know that there's some confusion that we hear about with, what is lead gen versus demand gen? What is buyer enablement versus sales enablement? You guys I don't know what the perfect question is for that, but I'd just like to tee that up for you guys to address those two and what the differences are and what you guys each see as the most effective way of engaging with buyers.
Yeah, well, to me, buyer enablement is what we just went through, enabling the buyer to have a journey, a prosperous journey that leads to the outcome that they're trying to achieve, and to do it in a way where they get to that point and they make the decision and they make the purchase and they're excited about the purchase. They didn't feel like they were pressured. It was a winning experience for them all the way around, because that also sets the stage for whatever happens post-sale, or even further, ongoing sales and the ongoing relationship with the customer. So to me, buyer enablement is, again, how, as that trusted advisor, do I help facilitate that journey as best that I can by enabling the buyer? Now, sales enablement, right, on the flip side is, you'll hear that a lot, is training my sales team. How do they sell? How do they be more effective? And Carson, I think you do a great job of this. Is you're doing a lot of times training, you're enabling your sales team to be trusted advisors. So you're trying to enable them to be the trusted advisor so they can enable the buyer. And I think that's the right sales enablement, trying to enable salespeople like, well, make sure you call 5 times, or don't take no for an answer, or make sure you leave 45 minutes, whatever the case may be. That's old school, high pressure stuff that is, in my opinion, not the best, or our opinion, I think, are not the best sales enablement strategy.
So well said. I mean, you're going to see more and more of this as the years go by, with the rise of data and information and artificial intelligence, and having all this information at your fingertips, both as a seller and a buyer. The game will continue to change. But Tom, you just said the most important thing yet, which is our role as sellers in buyer enablement amidst all of that. Something my team has done that just impressed the heck out of me was going so far as to not only get executive engagement with a customer executive. So getting, one of our executives aligned, multiple of our executives aligned with, the customer executive, but arming the customer executive with exactly the talking points that we were providing to our executives. Even going so far as to coach that buyer on what to do, what to ask for, how to get what they needed out of that discussion. These are the things that we are in very unique position to provide, but we don't necessarily always think about.
Exactly.
You take these steps. How can the customer not go on the journey with you and trust you because they know that you have their best interests at heart. If we go into these scenarios looking for what looks like a win to the customer and we get them to understand and care what looks like a win to us, and we find that common ground and those synergies and we explore transformative ways that we can partner and collaborate together, oh my gosh, that's where the magic happens. And I think, amongst all of these changes in our landscape, the more human we are, and the more we seek to serve and build real relationships, my gosh, that's where we're going to win.
Hey guys, I want to push back with the question that we get asked a lot. Okay, that sounds great, but it sounds like a lot of work. And does it really work? What other questions do we hear from sales leaders in there? But that's really what we hear from sales leaders, right? It's like, oh yeah, you give this great lip service, and it sounds really neat on paper. But let me go put my KPIs in place and tell my team to get their butts on the phone and start pounding away and not take no for an answer. How would you respond to that in this case?
I want to hear Tom's, but this is a perfect segue for something I've been wanting to say all along.
Drum roll.
I see a movie coming.
Yeah.
We have comfortable ways of mediocrity and failing that we undergo. So is it going to be work to change and have a different methodology, a different foundation, a different process? Yes, it will. There will be some work involved. I was talking to a friend and colleague and mentor of mine recently, and he was like, man, I really hate the phrase work smarter, not harder. It's like work smarter and harder. And yeah, there's going to be some hard work to building a foundation that can create the kind of success that you claim you want to have. But isn't it worth it? And frankly, if you create that foundation, the amount of work that you have to put into it will actually diminish if you build it right. You're going to have, checks and balances and tweaks and things like that. But you learn so much over a body of work. So I guess the immediate answer that I have is, does it work? Yes. And if you want to look at living proof, look at the guys on this call. We've been doing this a long time, though. You don't start out great. You may not even start out good as a salesperson. We've got a lot of wealth of experience of stuff that's worked and hasn't worked over our body of work. I think about the movie Groundhog Day.
I knew that.
In Groundhog Day, Bill Murray's brilliant character, Bill Connors, he gets up every day and he's like basically living the exact same day over and over again. And if you read the IMDb, which my wife always makes fun of me because if I like a movie, I'll always read all the IMDb trivia. That movie actually went on for thousands of days in the script. We learn from our mistakes and we ultimately work toward building the perfect or the best or the optimized scenario. And so my challenge to you is, if you're asking if it works or if it's worth the hard work, it absolutely is. But you're going to accumulate all this wisdom over time of what works and what doesn't. Infuse that into what you do, into what you build, and you'll be the best version of yourself as a seller and frankly, as a person.
Wow. That was quite a talk.
Yeah. And it was. I mean, it makes me talk. Tim, I want to let you.
I need to be like George Costanza at this point, just say, and that's it. I'm done.
I thought you were going to reference, who was the insurance salesman in Groundhog Day?
Ned Ryerson.
Ned Ryerson. Yeah, I thought you were going to reference him from the old school sales model. But no, I mean, you're exactly right, Carson. And why we call this show Social Selling for Newbies. I find even myself, right, and Brandon, trying to practice everything we preach. There are times when there's pressure or there's situation and there's almost this urge to go back to the old way, right? Or go back to okay, I'm going to go get this done, or I'm going to go and it never works, or rarely. And if it does work, you don't feel good about it. So it's a constant iteration, right? It's a muscle movement as you're going through and talking about, Carson, there, that you have to get really good at. But if you go back to the Brandon, your question, go back and listen. I think it's episode 18, if I'm not mistaken, of our show where we did social selling by the numbers. I think we have 2 of them. There's 18 and another one. We can put them in the show notes. But I mean, the statistics in there, which are not our statistics, they're just statistics that are so mind-bogglingly different than the statistics associated with them or the KPIs associated with the traditional old school approach. So I believe that people use the KPI as an excuse to not, because they don't want to go through the change process. But if you really look at the KPIs and you look at the numbers, it's a no-brainer. But it is, to your point, Carson, it is work, it is change, it is all of those things. But I as sellers, I'm not sure that we have a choice if we're going to continue to be competitive in the B2B world. So if we're going to do it, we might as well do it well and really enable the buyer,
Yeah.
provide that journey.
Yeah, Carson, I like the way well both of you said it, but Carson, how'd you say it? A comfortable way to be mediocre and fail.
Comfortable ways of mediocrity and
Yeah.
failure. I mean, think to yourself, like, how
Yeah.
many of those am I clinging to? It's easy. It's easy to sit in status quo or average, but if you want to be great, you want to be the best version of yourself, you're not going to be satisfied with doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. And I think there's a way of sales leaders feeling comfortable in protecting a little bit of CYA that if I go buy a database, I put in email cadences into CRM and I have KPIs of 150 calls a day and I implement this, I somehow am going to at least be protected for not losing my job because I did the right thing, even though they may go into it knowing that those KPIs are not really producing like they have before. And it goes back, I think we talked about this on a couple shows ago, is, what you did to get here isn't going to keep you here. And that's where I think a season of the world that we live in right now, where we've got to be bold, we've got to be courageous. And I'm not saying just, throw everything out and go at it. Like put a couple of your sales team members into Modern Seller HQ and start incorporating some new motions and seeing where they go, or get a few people trained up. But I think it's just too easy for people to do the same motions and go, I did what I'm supposed to do.
Well, and as you just pointed out, right, you're substituting activity for outcomes. So you're measuring activity, you're not measuring outcomes. And, even Carson, you were talking about some of the KPIs you're measuring against, which is connections and relationships. That's actually an outcome. That's a big, big deal as an outcome, right? That's a lot more of an outcome than a phone call or an email sent or a download of a, ebook or something like that. So, there are things that are very meaningful outcomes and milestones along the way. Those are the ones you want to be measuring. But yeah, it's not necessarily a function of activity. It's a function of outcome. And I think you're right, Brandon. People get nervous. Well, I'm not demonstrating enough activity. So therefore I'm going to, and outcomes, as we know, take time to create. So I'm not demonstrating enough activity. And I do think there's probably more KPIs and other things we can measure in this new world related to activity, but really it's the outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
I love that. I had a mentor tell me years ago, like, don't ever embark on anything from a process perspective without a tangible, trackable outcome.
It's good. And and what we're talking about too, and I'm pretty sure I've used this before on the show, is there was a podcast. I think it's the brutal one about selling. I haven't listened to it for a while. I got kind of bored and moved on to other
I think
ones.
it's Brutal Truth, right?
Yeah, Brutal Truth of Selling. Yeah, he had a BDR as a guest, and I believe she worked at Adobe at the time. And she told the story how she got called into her boss's office, and her boss said, "Hey, this is the call list of the person that's produced the most calls in the department." And it was this huge list of outbound calls. And her boss said to her, "And this is your list," which was substantially less. And she said she against the wall in that oh crap moment. And then her boss said to her, like, "Okay, calm down though, don't relax, because this is your close volume and this was his close volume, and it was like complete opposite." And she said, "What are you doing differently?" And basically her answer was quality versus quantity. And it was an example of quality versus quantity winning. And we just need more stories like that, because as much as I appreciate, Carson, you're right that we've done this for a while, but it's not. I think there's a misnomer out there that social selling takes a long time. Social prospecting, getting first calls, building relationships. It doesn't have to take years. You can do this very strategically and get there a little bit quicker.
Well, and what happens is too, I've seen this is as you start to build that foundation of relationships, your sales results start to hockey stick. And they start to hockey stick organically based on the hard work that you put in to build the relationships and have the right tools for enabling those relationships and enabling the buyers. Once you start having that happen, the flywheel starts to occur and then the hockey stick happens along the way. And there's a lot more predictability. That's what one of the subtitle of my book is, the new way of predictable revenue growth. That's what we want, is predictable revenue growth. That's what I didn't have in that board meeting. I didn't feel like I could predict anything. So ultimately that's what we want to get to. And it comes through the process that we're going through.
Cool. Here's what I'd love to do. Carson, can you summarize a little bit of what we've said and what you think is most important for people to take away from the show today? Then Tom, I want to give you a chance, like we would with the guest, a little bit around your Yellow Brick Road, your book, and where people can find you if they wanted to talk to you. I'll do a little plug for Modern Seller HQ. Then Carson, you can do a sign off. How's that sound for a wrap up plan?
Boy, we got a process. I like it.
I mean, you kind of put me on the spot here, Brandon, because I wasn't really paying much attention. I was really hoping to stick the landing on Groundhog Day, but I'll do my best here. Let's see how we go. I think where we really focused today was not only the importance of understanding what buyers want, but also what they don't want, and how we as sellers can really take the responsibility seriously of showing up, meeting them where they are, armed with relevant data and intel that we've gleaned from a number of sites, but mostly, again, seeking to uncover that trusted advisor status. What resonated greatly with me from Tom is really the heart and the impetus of where this all came from. He had a kludgy forecast, and I think we've all been there, right? Like, how confident are you? What's amazing to me, and as I've seen this evolve, and I work in a sales culture, is, we had what was called a closest to the pin, which ultimately became known as our CFO forecast, right? There's some onus when you're calling it a CFO forecast. I got to really, I'm putting it out there. If I'm going to say I'm going to hit this number exactly, and I'm going to be, tracking to that and on calls about that every week. And so I think the key is think about the goals that you have, whether they're revenue or KPI focused, but it's all about the process that you build around that to show up the right way to sellers, arm yourself with the right level of intel to understand their buying process, to make sure that you understand that this is, in fact, a journey, but that you've got to earn your keep. You got to earn your right to be there, but you've also got to keep earning over and over to make sure that you're part of the buying journey and the post-sale journey so that there's ultimately more buying. But those were some of my key takeaways. And that really, as we see time and frankly, technology and AI and data and mechanisms by which we can connect with people continue to change, it's all the more important that we stay true to those fundamentals. And we, at the heart, we're really at the pulse of what buyers want.
I love the kludgy forecast.
Oh,
we've all been there, haven't we?
Yeah. And it doesn't feel good, right? It doesn't feel good. And it's, you can dance around a little bit, but it's not, especially at a board meeting, it's not what you want to be doing. So, I think we need like kludgy forecast with a big slash through it. That's the thing.
Done. We got a new.
I see a new graphic in our future.
A new graphic for our community. Yeah.
That's it. So Tom, as our guest, where can people find you? How should they connect with you?
Well, I'm on a podcast every week called Social Selling for Newbies, so they should definitely show up for that. I'm with a couple of co-hosts.
You better write that down.
Yeah, but no, I mean, the book I wrote is called The Revenue Zone. It's on Amazon. It's an audiobook. It's paperback as well. The website's therevenuezone.com. But really, in the Modern Seller HQ community, I created a whole course in there about this that kind of filled in some of the gaps. So one of the things, the book's almost a year old now. So one of the things I've learned in the last year is that, I've definitely learned some things that I didn't know before I had written the book. So the course is more of a fill in the gap type of thing, some videos and other things based on the lessons learned on how to do that buyer enablement. How do you work out, the right content for the right buyers, and how do you provide that? And how do you build a buyer enablement strategy, which is what the Yellow Brick Road is. So there's a course it's in the Modern Seller HQ community on that. It's free. It's in there. It's open, available. So go check that out and get the book. And also certainly reach out to us in the community. So, and I'm also on LinkedIn, of course.
Perfect. Well, Tom did a great job there of saying, look, Modern Seller HQ continues to evolve. We seem to have a flurry of registrations over the last few days, which has been exciting. We've got some new spaces coming in place. We've got some inner circles getting created. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. But if you're anywhere on this continuum of, hey, this sounds interesting, you'd like to learn more, or man, these guys sound like they're completely full of crap, and I don't believe any of this. Like, this is a good place to go in and start talking, not just with us, but other people that are going through this journey. I think there's a lot of people in there that have hit walls in their sales cadences and their emotions that they've relied on for years, and they're not working as well anymore. So come on over, modernsellerhq.com. It's free. And we'd love to have you in there and answer questions and chit chat and learn with you and from you as well. So, hey, I think we're wrapped up. Tom, thanks for being a great guest. And Carson, I must say that today was an exceptional day of movie references for you.
And
big old high five on that one.
Brandon Triplett, send me a DM with your address, and I'll get you a signed copy of Salesman on Fire.
Perfect. There we go.
All right, Carson. Rocky music to end off here.
Dun-dun-dun.
Yeah, I know.
Or Eye of the Tiger, either one.
That's right. Well, sign us off, Carson, and let's wrap the show up.
Thank you all. Tom, thanks for being a great guest. Brandon, thanks for being a great host. And thank you all for joining us. And until next time, happy social selling.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.